On the night of their 30th wedding anniversary, the Emerald Anniversary, Dr. Julian Harrington stood at the head of a candlelit ballroom in the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Chicago and handed his wife, Evelyn Harrington, a thick cream envelope instead of the emerald necklace everyone expected. 30 years is long enough, Ev, he announced loudly enough for the entire room to hear. I've met someone who actually excites me. You'll be out of the Lakeshore Drive penthouse by Monday. A collective gasp rippled through the 120 guests, old money, new money, hospital board members, college friends who had flown in from both coasts. Crystal glasses froze halfway to lips. Evelyn, 55, elegant in a floor-length emerald silk gown that matched the occasion perfectly, did not flinch. She simply took the envelope, opened it with steady fingers, and slid out the divorce petition. She even smiled, a small, polite smile that did not reach her eyes. Julian's mother, Victoria Harrington, 80 years old but sharp as winter air, sat at the head table wearing a triumphant smirk and a triple strand of pearls. Evelyn set the papers down, reached for the microphone the string quartet had been using for announcements, and tapped it twice. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice clear and warm, "my husband has just given me the most extraordinary anniversary gift. Allow me to return the favor." Julian chuckled nervously, expecting tears, hysteria, a scene. Instead, Evelyn turned to him with the sweetest expression he had seen in years. "But first," she said, "let's rewind a little. Some of you have known us since Northwestern. Some of you were at our wedding at the Drake. All of you think you know our story. You don't. Not yet." And that was the night Evelyn Harrington burned the entire lie to the ground and rose from the ashes richer, freer, and more gloriously vindicated than anyone in that ballroom could ever have imagined. 6 weeks earlier, mid-September, Evelyn Harrington woke at 3:17 a.m. to the low murmur of her husband's voice in the hallway of their 4,200-square-foot penthouse on the 62nd floor of 680 North Lakeshore Drive. She lay perfectly still in the dark, cashmere blanket pulled to her chin, and listened. "Yes, Mother, I'm sure she has no idea. The lake house closing is next week. No, the offshore accounts are in the Caymans now. The Emerald Party is the perfect cover. After my speech, she'll be too humiliated to fight. Hayes has the papers ready. She'll sign anything to avoid further embarrassment." Julian's voice was excited, almost boyish. Evelyn had not heard that tone in 15 years. She waited until his footsteps receded, then slipped out of bed in her silk nightgown and padded barefoot to his study. The door was ajar. His MacBook glowed on the desk. He had never needed a password before, always used 08191, the date of their first kiss at the Sigma Chi formal. She tried it. Locked. For the first time in 30 years, Julian had locked her out. Her chest tightened, but Evelyn Harrington had spent 2 decades running the fundraising arm of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. She knew how to stay calm when millions were on the line. She took a photo of the darkened screen with her phone, then returned to bed and pretended to sleep when Julian slid back under the covers, smelling faintly of cigar smoke and a cloying floral perfume she did not recognize. The next morning, he kissed her cheek with theatrical tenderness. "Morning, darling. How about we finalize the guest list for the Emerald Anniversary tonight? I want it perfect. Black tie, the big ballroom, string quartet, the works." In 30 years, Julian had never once cared about party details. Evelyn organized everything. He simply showed up and charmed the donors. "Of course," she said, sipping coffee and watching him over the rim of her cup. "Whatever you want, love." His left eye twitched, the tell he'd had since medical school whenever he lied. That afternoon, she went to the Apple store on Michigan Avenue and paid a college kid $200 cash to recover the new password from the screenshot she'd taken. By evening, she was inside Julian's laptop. The search history made her stomach turn. How to hide assets in Divorce, Illinois. Offshore LLC Caymans Anonymous. Can a spouse be forced to settle a primary residence? Quiet title action after fraudulent transfer. Best Chicago divorce attorneys for high net worth men. There were booked first-class tickets to Grand Cayman for two, Julian and Lila Moreau. Hotel confirmation at the Ritz-Carlton for the week after the anniversary party. A calendar reminder, transfer final $4.8 million before 10/25. And dozens of text screenshots saved in a hidden folder. Julian and a woman named Lila, who was 28, blonde, and apparently addicted to him. I can't wait to wake up to Lake Michigan views every morning in our penthouse, Daddy. You promised the lake house in Wisconsin, too. Your mother says Evelyn will crumble the moment you serve her in public. She's already spoken to the lawyer. Evelyn read until her eyes burned, then closed the laptop, poured herself a finger of Julian's 25-year-old Macallan, and toasted the skyline. Let the games begin, she whispered. The players. Dr. Julian Harrington, 58, chief of cardiothoracic surgery at Northwestern Memorial, nationally renowned, ego the size of the Hancock Building. Victoria Harrington, his mother, old Chicago money, lived in a 14-room apartment on Astor Street, still chaired 3 charity boards at 80. Lila Moreau, 28, former pharma rep turned wellness influencer, collagen peptide skin, Pilates body, and the moral backbone of a house cat. Richard Hayes Esquire, Julian's college roommate turned cutthroat divorce attorney. And Evelyn Grace Harrington, 55, former ICU nurse who married the brilliant young surgeon, raised millions for the hospital that employed him, kept the homes, the social calendar, the perfection. Everyone's favorite doctor's wife, quiet, elegant, lethal when cornered. Week 1, Discovery. Evelyn did not cry. She made lists. First, she called Margaret Maggie O'Brien, her sorority big sister from Kappa Alpha Theta, now the most feared family law partner at Kirkland & Ellis. They met at the Quiet Bar at the Langham. Maggie listened without interruption while Evelyn laid out the screenshots, the offshore transfers, the planned public humiliation. When Evelyn finished, Maggie leaned back and smiled like a wolf who just spotted dinner. Evie, darling, your husband is a greedy amateur, and greedy amateurs always lose. Here's what we're going to do. Over the next 5 weeks, Evelyn moved like a ghost. She quietly retained Maggie off book, no paper trail Julian's people could find. She hired the best forensic accountant in the Midwest, Daniel Park, who traced every dollar Julian had siphoned into the Caymans. She discovered the Lakeshore Drive penthouse, supposedly their biggest marital asset, had been purchased solely with a trust from her late father in 1998, 1 year before the wedding, titled only in her name. Julian had been added later for estate planning. In Illinois, that made it non-marital property. She learned that the Wisconsin lake house Julian planned to gift Lila had also come from her father's trust, again non-marital. She found out Victoria had co-signed a $1.2 million home equity line on the Astor Street apartment to fund Julian's defense and Lila's patience gifts. Birkins, Cartier, a leased Porsche 911. Most delicious of all, 2 weeks earlier, Evelyn's childless great-aunt Celeste, her mother's sister, had died in Zurich and left Evelyn her entire estate. 2 apartments in Paris, combined value 4.8 million euros, a villa in Lugano, and liquid assets of 11.4 million USD. The Swiss notary had mailed the letter to Evelyn's private P.O. box, which Julian didn't know existed. Evelyn told no one, not yet. 3. The trap springs. Julian grew bolder. He brought Lila to the hospital gala as his new research coordinator. She wore a backless red gown and hung on his arm while he introduced her to board members who later called Evelyn in tears. He started picking fights. Evelyn, really, at your age, you should consider a trainer. Lila deadlifts 185. Darling, that dress is a little matronly, don't you think? He scheduled the Emerald Anniversary Party for October 26th at the Four Seasons. 140 guests, $175,000 budget, all charged to their joint Amex Black Card. Victoria phoned Evelyn daily with saccharine concern. Dear, have you thought about what you'll do after? Julian says you might want to downsize. Lake Forest is lovely and far more age-appropriate. Evelyn smiled into the phone. We'll see, Victoria. I'm rather attached to my view. Every night she added to her folder bank records, text screenshots, the original penthouse deed, the Swiss inheritance documents, Daniel Park's forensic report showing Julian had moved $9.3 million offshore. She slept like a baby. The night of the party, October 26th. The ballroom was a dream of emerald and gold, orchids flown in from Thailand, a 12-piece orchestra, a custom ice sculpture of 2 intertwined hearts. Evelyn wore a custom Oscar de la Renta gown in deep emerald silk with a neckline that plunged just enough to remind every man in the room what Julian was throwing away. She greeted guests with warmth, accepted compliments, kissed cheeks. Inside, she was ice. Julian was vibrating with anticipation. Victoria sat beside him in diamonds and smugness. Leela, introduced as my brilliant new administrator, wore a white gown that screamed wedding dress and clung to Julian every chance she got. At 9:45 p.m., after the filet and the vintage Krug, the orchestra paused. The MC, a hospital board member Julian had strong-armed, handed Julian the microphone. Julian stood, radiant in his midnight blue tux, and cleared his throat. Friends, family, colleagues, 30 years ago, I stood in a church on Michigan Avenue and promised to love one woman forever. Tonight, I have to be honest with you and with myself. Forever turned out to be unrealistic. The room stilled. Evelyn has been a wonderful partner in many ways, he continued, voice dripping with condescension. But people grow apart. I've met someone who shares my vision for the future, someone vibrant, someone who makes me feel alive again. He gestured grandly toward Leela, who gave a little finger wave like Miss America. Gasps. A fork clattered. So tonight, Julian said, pulling the cream envelope from his breast pocket, on our emerald anniversary, I'm giving Evelyn her freedom, and I'm claiming mine. He held the divorce petition aloft like a trophy. Victoria beamed. Leela preened. Evelyn rose slowly, smoothing her gown, and walked to the small stage. She took the microphone from Julian's suddenly uncertain hand. "Thank you, darling," she said, voice honey over steel. "That was brave. May I? Julian nodded, confused. This wasn't in the script. Evelyn faced the room. 30 years ago, Julian promised to love, honor, and cherish me. Tonight, he kept one of those promises. He honored me with the truth at last. Polite laughter rippled, then died. I've known about Lila for 7 weeks, Evelyn said conversationally. I've read the texts. I've seen the offshore accounts. I know about the plan to serve me here, tonight, in front of all of you, so I'd be too humiliated to fight for what is mine. She pulled a thick emerald green folder from the silk clutch at her wrist. Fortunately for me, Julian overlooked a few details. She opened the folder and held up the original 1998 deed to the penthouse. This home, $42 million on today's market, was purchased with my father's trust, titled solely in my name 1 year before we married. In Illinois, that makes it non-marital property. Julian gets 0. She held up the lake house deed. Same trust, same result. Julian went the color of spoiled milk. Furthermore, Evelyn continued, 2 months ago, my great-aunt Celeste died in Zurich and left me her entire estate. 2 apartments in Paris, a villa on Lake Lugano, and $11 million in liquid assets. I received the letter the same week Julian booked your little Cayman celebration, darlin'. She turned to Lila with a dazzling smile. Sorry, sweetheart, no penthouse, no lake house, no offshore millions. Just a used Porsche lease and whatever's left on Julian's Amex after tonight's $175,000 bill hits. Lila's mouth opened and closed like a goldfish. Evelyn turned back to the crowd. And because I'm not cruel, I had the restaurant add a special dessert course, copies of the forensic accounting report showing Julian moved $9 million offshore to hide it from me, 1 on every table. Enjoy. She gestured. Waiters in white gloves swept through the room, placing emerald folders at each setting. Pandemonium. Victoria shrieked, "This is slander," and tried to stand, but her pearls caught on the tablecloth and she sat back hard. Hospital board members were already on their phones that were filming everything. Julian lunged for the microphone. "Evelyn, we can talk privately." "No need," she said sweetly. "My attorney, Maggie O'Brien, is here tonight. Wave, Maggie." Maggie, stunning in red, raised a champagne flute from the back. "She filed my petition this morning. You'll be served Monday, Julian, after the board meeting where they'll be reviewing your ethics." The CEO of the hospital, Dr. Patel, stood up slowly, face grim. "Julian, my office, 8 a.m. Lila was backing toward the exit, but a cluster of furious society matrons blocked her path. "You little tramp," hissed Bitsy Winthrop, chair of the Women's Board. "I raised $3 million with Evelyn last year. You think we'll let you waltz off with her life?" Security, hired for the party, suddenly had a lot to do. Julian tried one last grasp. "Evelyn, please, I made a mistake." "Yes," she said softly so only he could hear. "You did." She faced the room one final time. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate 30 years. The marriage is over, but the party doesn't have to be. The bar is open, the orchestra is paid until midnight, and the dessert course is to die for." She set the microphone down, stepped off the stage, and walked out through the lobby into the crisp October night on Michigan Avenue. Behind her, the ballroom erupted, shouting, crying, camera flashes, Victoria Harrington having a full meltdown, while Lila screamed, "You said she'd just sign!" Evelyn's driver held the door of the dark green Bentley. She slid into the back seat, rolled the window down, and let the city air hit her face. "Home, Mrs. Harrington?" the driver asked. She smiled. "Yes, Charles, home, and keep the partition up. I have calls to make." Epilogue. 1 year later. Julian lost his partnership at the surgical practice within weeks. The viral video, "Cardiothoracic Surgeon Dumps Wife at Emerald Anniversary, Gets Owned," hit 30 million views. He now does locum tenens work in downstate Illinois, driving a 2012 Honda Accord, living in a one-bedroom in Peoria. Victoria had to sell the Astor Street Co-op to pay the legal bills. She now resides in a pleasant but modest assisted living facility in Hinsdale and tells anyone who will listen that her daughter-in-law bewitched her son. Leela married a 62-year-old dental implant magnate from Naperville 6 months later. She posts thirst traps from his timeshare in Cabo. The Porsche got repossessed. Evelyn sold the Lakeshore Drive penthouse for $41.8 million, all cash 2024 market, kept one Paris apartment for herself, sold the other and the Lugano villa, and donated $10 million to create the Celeste Grace Harrington Foundation for women leaving abusive marriages, legal aid, housing, therapy, the works. She spends autumn in Chicago chairing galas, now as the guest of honor, winters in Lugano, and springs in Paris. She is dating a lovely Swiss-French architect 15 years younger who thinks her laugh could power the city grid. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she stands on her balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, or the Seine, or Lake Lugano, and raises a glass of champagne to the woman she used to be. Then she smiles because that woman is gone. And the woman who remains? She is untouchable. So, lovely reader, did you enjoy Evelyn's revenge? From which city are you cheering her on tonight? Drop your city in the comments. I read every single one. If this story made your blood sing, hit that super thanks so I can keep writing these deliciously satisfying tales of women who refuse to be broken. 2 brand new stories are waiting on screen right now. Subscribe, turn on the bell, and I'll see you very soon.